All right, everybody. David Harper is back. You may remember he's the man who identified the canary in the coal mine of American democracy a few years ago with his book Laboratories of Autocracy. And he's now the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in Ohio. And he and Amy Acton, the nominee for governor there, are running a hell of a campaign in a state many had given up on. David, thank you for taking the time to come back and talk to us about the race.
Of course, I'm really excited to join you again.
Well, how's it going?
It is going well. I think we're right at the 100-day mark, and we basically are tied. And as I try and say to people in Ohio, you take nothing for granted. You don't get overconfident, but to be tied with 100 days in Ohio is a rare opportunity. And now we got to go out and grab it and seize it and just do everything we can to win in 100 days. But to be tied against this whiny billionaire who's spending millions and millions on TV and has been for March, we're still tied. We're still up with independents. Vivek Ramaswamy has never been less popular than he is right now. It really is a golden opportunity that does not come around much in Ohio.
I want to talk about the race, but just about I want to get your experience for 1 second first. I found being a candidate for statewide office was an amazing experience. You meet so many people in the state doing such interesting things that you can't help but feel hopeful, even in a state that's badly governed. Are you feeling that?
Yeah, it is so true. And you and I have talked in my past sort of
Yeah.
iterations where I wrote these books and did these other things. There's nothing like being a candidate because it cuts through so much of the clutter. You're not sitting around watching cable TV as a candidate. You're talking to people every single day. And that does make you hopeful because you realize most people out there, they're just looking for answers. They have stories to tell you. There's so many inspiring stories. And they really are looking for people. Right now, we all know it. They're looking for people who are going to actually start solving problems of everyday life, starting with the higher costs of everything. But there is something, I was in Canton last night. I've been out in rural Ohio. We've been in big cities. And there really is, as you know, and I think if you're doing this for the right reasons, it's the best part. You just are uplifted. You're inspired. And even when you're hearing tough, I sat down a few weeks ago with homeless youth in Toledo.
Mhm.
I will never forget the meeting ever about these young people who have gone through so much. They're advocating for their sort of fellow homeless youth. And we were sitting around a table. It was absolutely inspiring. So that's the part of campaigning that it gets lost when you have all the back and forth, especially these days with social media. But it really does. It reminds you why you do it. It reminds you why people are frustrated. They don't see more from their leaders. And it does keep you going amid all the other crazy sort of post-citizens united stuff that's made politics so much worse in so many ways.
Yeah, and if you do it right, I mean, if you're not spending all your time in a back room calling donors, but you're out doing what you are doing and what Amy Atkin is doing, meeting people, you end up, if you win, much better at the job.
Yes, that's the other thing. And this is my advice to anyone running. Don't just spend your time telling them about you. Listen to the stories of everyday Ohioans or wherever, because you're always learning. You're always hearing about these issues. And I feel when a campaign is disciplined enough that you're, like you said, you're not just sitting around raising money, but you're out with people. And when a campaign is disciplined enough, the candidate will get so much better at being in tune and realize a lot of the nonsense that flies around on TV and everything else or social media is completely disconnected from what everyday folks are worrying about, or the others, what are solutions that we might find. That's why I love sitting around that table I was with homeless youth. Like, they were talking about answers. They were saying, well, if we fix the transportation system, if we did more here and there, we would have a better path. So if you're doing it right, you're always listening, you're always much more in tune, and you're always learning about how to solve problems. And again, it just makes you better if you, like you said, if you win, you're in a much better place to govern if you've campaigned this way.
Yeah, yeah. It's just it's a deeply rewarding. People don't understand this. It's very hard to be a candidate, and it's particularly hard on your family because people say terrible things about you. But what you learn from the people in your state is a gift.
It really, I couldn't agree more. And I do feel it. And Dr. Acton, she has been literally out on the road for 2.5 years and has had that sort of almost daily experience of interacting with everyday Ohioans. And so she's an unbelievable candidate in that way. She was a really strong leader when she was a state health director and got known that way. But she's even more impressive to me as sort of a retail on the ground, just interacting and engaging with people every day. It's really one of her great strengths, and I'm proud to be campaigning with her in that way.
All right, well, let's talk about the campaign a little bit. Partly because of what you've heard, the focus is on how to make life more affordable. And I think just this week, there was a whole property tax focus tied to schools, which I think is fascinating. So I'd love to talk about that. And I think the campaign might also be a little bit focused on Vivek Ramaswamy, so we could talk about both.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you know this from our prior conversations, that we live in one of the most corrupt states in America. And what
By the way,
happens
as a
in
man who
state-
lives in Illinois, I am deeply grateful for that.
yes,
You took us off the
sadly,
front page.
Yes, if you look at HBO right now, I think we've got you beat. It's sad for Ohio. But what happens in a world of corruption? In a world of corruption, public assets are basically diverted to the big shot private players, and the rest of us are stuck paying the bills. That's why costs are going up across the board. So when they underfund schools because they are taking tax dollars and giving it away, trickle-down economics, the Browns get a $600 million bonanza. They underfund schools, and who makes up the difference? Everyday Ohioans for higher local property taxes. When we had a corrupt energy bill, our energy bills went up. So it's the same pattern. Like corruption leads to terrible. It's not only doesn't just lead to certain people making out like bandits, but the public faces and shoulders the costs of corruption. And so when we lay out a property tax plan, property taxes haven't gone up just because. They've gone up because our state for years has underfunded local governments, underfunded schools. It has been state policy to lift property taxes through this sort of two-step process. So we laid out a plan, and I don't care if you're in a blue area or a red area, people are all saying, my gosh, I may get pushed out of my home because the state has stuck us with this. So we laid out a plan first, fully fund the schools from the state. The state has an obligation to fund schools. Not only will that lead to better schools, which we want, it will take the pressure off local property taxes, which are disproportionately paying for schools, as even the state Supreme Court found a few years ago. But the other thing we have to do in the more near term, and everything we're focused on is Mikey Sherrill said at the head of her campaign, it's not just about some long-term plan. People need relief now. And so we have ways we can broaden the homestead exemption in Ohio to relieve seniors of higher taxes who are literally being pushed out of their homes right now. We've got a proposal that I'm very excited about. It will basically be very sensitive to people who've seen an especially large property tax increase in the last couple of years, who are working Ohioans who, again, the breaks in Ohio for 20 years have all gone to those at the top. What we're trying to focus on is the people working hard who haven't gotten a break, who are the most vulnerable to these cost increases and cost spikes. So we target those homeowners to provide some immediate relief for them. And we also, one of the things that's happening in many states like Ohio is the minute people get behind on their payments, some are getting tossed into sort of the world of private collectors. That often leads to predatory practices. All of a sudden, they're paying exorbitant interest rates. A year later, they're out of their home. So we're going to really go after those types of practices and make sure that people who, if some corporate owner of property is purposely not paying their taxes, yeah, let's go after them. But if it's some, senior or veteran or someone else who, for no fault of their own, because everything's going up in cost, is all of a sudden behind, and there was no way to not be behind, we want to make sure they don't get caught up in practices that basically cost them more and put them out of their home. So
let me stop there for 1 second,
simple,
David.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that, the right wing says, "Oh, we just care about people who can't pay their bills. We're not focused on everybody else." But I just want to remind everybody that if you're a big company and you have you run into trouble with a big bank, The first instinct isn't to foreclose, it's to figure out how to work it out because that's just so much better
Right.
for everyone and for the economy as a whole. So this is like not this is any of you on the right wing who are listening who think this sounds like a giveaway, you know what? You couldn't be more wrong. It's about building stronger communities.
Yeah, in this case, it's to protect against predatory practices that make a profit out of people's, struggles. And you,
Yep.
you literally walk around Ohio like we are, and you run into people who, a few years ago, they were perfectly, keeping up with their property tax bill, but the pressure has gone up. They've stuck local property taxpayers. Basically, it's been 20 years. Give away tax breaks at the top from the state, underfund services, and rely on local property taxpayers. It's been the most predictable sort of scammy thing. And so they're feeling it now. They don't see the connection to the state house, which is a problem. And they need some relief or they're going to lose their homes. And in the process, sometimes we know that people take advantage of that for their own profit. And what we're saying here is we are going to protect homeowners who are falling behind from getting thrown into the bucket of people who get basically turned into the target of predatory collection practices that not only cost them more, but ultimately they lose their home anyway.
Yeah. Which just destabilizes whole communities. It's just ridiculous.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All
And
right.
that's just one of, we are laying out, our mantra in our mind is, make stuff cost less, just drive down prices. And they're just like property taxes, on healthcare, we have a plan. Actually, Governor Pritzker did it in Illinois. There are ways that states who've got their act together can alleviate medical debt that is burdening so many people. There are ways to go after drug prices. There's ways to go after, energy bills. And so the property tax thing was what we laid out this week, and we got a great response to it. But we are going to be laying out all the ways that we can help in this time of escalating prices, help Ohioans feel like they're paying less for things that right now just feel like together are overwhelming them.
As you've said, Ohio has been a case study in sort of corporate I don't even know how to say it, corrupt corporate GOP machine. Whether that's a fake charter school company who rewards legislators so that they can charge taxpayers for students who never existed, or I think you just talked about like the private utility that gets to gouge ratepayers because politicians are paid to look the other way. What you guys are doing, I mean, this is so deeply embedded now in the structure of the political system in Ohio after all these years. Your campaign must be terrifying to those who have a stake in the status quo.
Yeah, no, it is. And especially the more they see, I think, a year ago when you and I probably first started talking about Amy Acton, I just think they thought, it's Ohio. Vivek's got all this money. There's no way we're going to lose. But the more that we've gone on, the more he's spent. It's not working. Elon Musk gave him $5 million not long ago. They're really attacking Dr. Acton through just absurd lies. But what we're seeing in the polling is that it remains tied. She has a real edge with independents. Ramaswamy's underwater. And so what you see, and I won't go through them all, but they're panicking. And their panicking is showing up, and just every day it's more outrageous what they're saying because they're figuring out two things. One, no one is buying what Ramaswamy's trying to sell. He does not look like some public servant hero. He looks like a billionaire, this whiny billionaire who's out for himself. His campaign is there are multiple ways in which his own investments would be benefited by the policies he's pushing. People see that. The billionaire is paying for his super PAC. One guy's out of Philadelphia. This guy, Yass, he wants to end public schools. That's what's going to happen if Vivek wins. This is what this guy's about. So people see, I've been asked this enough. I now start asking it. Why would a billionaire be running for governor? A guy who moved his business to Texas before the campaign started. He went to Michigan once and said, Ohio's a good state. I can't say it's a great state. He says that Ohioans are lazy, mediocre. The guy doesn't even like us. Why would we want him to be governor? And why would a billionaire be governor? Is it to really help go to bat for our costs? Of course not. Is he going to protect our parks? Of course not. That's not why he's running. That's not why Musk is giving him money. And I think that basic question is why Ramaswamy, from the very beginning, has always been underwater. Ohioans don't trust him. They kind of see that he's out for himself. His origin story was that he claimed that he had a cure for Alzheimer's, which turns out to be false. So I think people sort of see that this just doesn't make sense. Why would you, in a time where costs are too high because billionaires are making out like bandits, why would you put one in charge? And so because of that, because he will never be able to sell any kind of positive to his candidacy, they are panicking, and they're basically turning it into an onslaught paid for by Musk and company against Dr. Acton. And, you know, this is the tart of the campaign. It's tough when they start doing that. But the good news is her brand is so strong because she was such a good leader that she's holding up as well as anyone could. It's tied. We're still up with independents, and Ramaswamy's lower than ever. So, yeah, they're scared, and we see that. And when you see, you know, this guy's already got all the money he needs, but now all of a sudden Musk needs to bail him out, I think they are really worried.
I think that's such good news. I mean, back in my formative years in politics, you know, we had Chicago's first black mayor was a man named Harold Washington, and he was running against all of the party money. And he used to go around Chicago and say, I get it. They want to pay you to vote for them. I get it. Take their money and vote for me. And that's what people did.
Right.
And, you know, I mean,
Right.
right? They're going to spend a fortune. And you're like, I get it. Take their money, like get the, you know, buy the ads. It's good for our economy. Vote for us.
Right. Yeah, and Amy, you know, Amy says at the end of every speech, you cannot buy Ohio. You cannot buy us. And I think right now the voters are saying, they're basically saying that. And by the way, a couple of things, because you and I haven't talked since then. We had the highest primary turnout we've had since '06. On the Democratic side, our turnout was up 50%. The Republican turnout was down 25%. They're just not enthusiastic about Ramaswamy. Amy Acton got more votes for governor in a primary than anybody in the history of Ohio, of either party, incumbent or challenger. You know, John Kasich ran, for example, during the Tea Party movement in 2010.
Yep.
Amy got more votes than he did. And she didn't have a primary. It wasn't like there was a big contest to show up for. Democrats showed up. They were energized. They voted for her. And a lot we saw in the data, some reporters looked into it. This wasn't just Democrats getting enthusiastic. This was independents and Republicans walking into a polling place. And in Ohio, you declare your registration by what party primary you voted. And they walked in and said, give me the Democratic ballot. I'm voting for Amy Acton. So there is real energy there. The other thing I'd say, you mentioned money. Believe it or not, as much as Vivek has this billionaire Rolodex he can call, since January, we have outraised him by $2 million by getting contributions $24 at a time. So even though he's got all this advantage, we are outraising him. He was down to $1 million cash on hand, had to loan himself $25 million because he's been spending so much and it hasn't worked. And his fundraising, except for his own check writing and this Musk-funded PAC, his own fundraising has been slower than ours because we have grassroots support from all over Ohio, and he's sort of running out of gas.
This is the year organized people beat organized money. I love that. Love that. David, that one of the things that it's hard to remember, you know, because we run one election at a time. And like, okay, turnout was great in the primary. But turnout was great in the primary in part because of work that you and others have done in that state for years on campaigns to change the state constitution, on citizen referenda, I mean, Blue Ohio, for example, just the work that has taken years to get to this point where a very red state, which Ohio, has become, people are willing to say, I'm going to show up and I don't want to live like this.
Yeah, interestingly, you mentioned that one thing about Blue Ohio. This was a big lift by a lot of people. We are seeing a candidate, I think, in either every district or all but one in Ohio, which is, again, you and I have talked about this before. Leaving half these districts uncontested has been a terrible mistake all across the country. And this year, not just in Ohio, but all across the country, you've seen many, many states where there are zero uncontested races, or maybe 1 or 2% uncontested versus only, a few years ago it was 40 or 50%. That also helps the turnout because you're running everywhere. Amy Acton is everywhere. She is all over the state. I am as well. A couple weeks ago, between Amy and I, we made 12 stops in 12 different counties, many of them who often don't see Democrats show up. But now we show up, but there's also a state house candidate running in a district that hasn't been contested in a long time. That also contributes to the the energy we're seeing. And by the way, one thing we were very excited about, because as you said early in this race, this was considered likely Republican. Then it came lean Republican. And I think just a week or two ago, Cook Political Report called it a toss-up. Fox News had us as a toss-up yesterday. And we're seeing, again, as I think it was a Trump pollster that did the AARP poll a couple weeks ago that found us up 3 and winning 2-1 with independents. This pollster even said, even if Republicans, coalesce on Ramaswamy, which has not happened yet, we would still win based upon our lead with independents. So, with 100 days to go, like I said, I don't want to sound overconfident, but I also know people think, well, Ohio's red, you can't win. What we have here is a golden opportunity, a tie ball game. After $30 million spent by one side, we will be spending ours soon. We've raised, like I said, record amounts. It is a golden opportunity. We just got to grab it.
I think that's just terrific. And I just want to say, in the next 100 days, I think about what the Republicans are doing around the country, and I just can't imagine that they're going to have a massive personality and policy change and start doing things Americans like. I just think they're digging a hole as fast as they can around the country, and their president sure isn't helping them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right now, what are we? I drove from Canton home last night. Almost every gas station was at $3.99. They're literally, now we have a new round of tariffs. Like, they are driving costs up with 100 days to go. What are we saying? We're going to make stuff affordable again, basically. We're going to reduce costs. And every single day for the next 100 days, we are going to be telling people we're going to make health, we're going to make health costs go down. We're going to make your child care costs go down. And so they are saying, not just saying, they are doing the exact opposite. And you can literally track the voters based upon gas prices at this point. They feel it. They see it. It's one other thing beyond all the other costs. And so what do we have to do? Spend 100 days just getting out there, getting all over the state, and being crystal clear from the moment we get there. Day one, there are things we can do to make Ohio, cost less for you, and we're going to start doing them. It's not just a long-term plan, as Mikey Sherrill said. It's from the moment we get there. Hell, don't do it on day one. Do it on night one. Before you're even sworn in, start getting to work on it. And I think people feel the need for that, and they're looking for that. And the other side right now is honestly by the way, a lot of Vivek's plans are the same trick that those at the top will make out like bandits. And here's an example, Ed. He has said he's going to get rid of the income tax like Sam Brownback did, which destroyed Kansas.
Oh, for God's sake.
He was asked, well, how are you going to pay for that? Do you know what his answer was? His answer was, we have too many colleges and universities in Ohio. We'll just get rid of some of them. That was his answer. So Amy Acton literally is where she is today because she could commute and go to Youngstown State and work 3 jobs. Yeah. He would make young people like her and their families pay the price through fewer educational opportunities for his tax cut for himself. And so when you look closely, not only are their policies lifting costs, but their proposals are more breaks for themselves that everyday Ohioans pay for. And of course, we're going to spend the next 100 days hammering home that it's not, with Vivek, it's not just more of the same. It's actually doubling down on the worst of it versus our plan, which is to actually, make stuff affordable again across Ohio.
So the policy differences could not be clearer. The who are you fighting for question could not be clearer. The one other area where I think you have an advantage is you talk about these are the things we need to do and get done. A lot of candidates go into elections and they talk about the things they want to do, and then they get in power and they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how the government works.
Yeah,
They don't know how to deliver anything. And Vivek is that kind of guy from like he's going to, fly in and pretend that this is a small startup when it's a state government
right.
and be clueless. You guys actually have
Absolutely.
seen this machine. You know how to make it work. So you have a chance to deliver on these promises, and in fact, to deliver on ones that aren't really the ones that you're talking about in this campaign, like just make transit work better or things like that people
Right.
want.
So Dr. Acton, literally, if you were in Ohio, she was at the right hand of Mike DeWine throughout the pandemic. So she literally saw and operated all of government. People in Ohio saw that. So she walks in there knowing what to do as well as anybody could. I was a local, we remember this, I was a city council member, county commissioner, so I know the local level well. Ramaswamy's never, except for the few days he was at Doge before he got fired, this guy's never been involved at all. Why would you make a billionaire who doesn't like Ohio, who has no public service experience, whose ideas are off the charts nuts, like get rid of all revenue and say everything's going to be wonderful and we'll just cut schools? Why would you ever put him in charge? He's nowhere. He's never been anywhere near public service. The community college idea is a perfect idea. He approached that as some kind of private equity VC guy. Oh, there are just too many of them. We'll just get rid of some of them. If you were to get rid of what he's saying, you wouldn't just decimate opportunities for young people. You would be nuking the economy of multiple towns across Ohio who rely on that local campus as the heart of their community. So he shows up with his sort of, hedge fund or private equity mindset saying, we'll just consolidate them. By the way, who was one of the first people to say that idea made no sense? The Republican governor of Ohio said he just doesn't know the state very well, or he wouldn't say that. So you're absolutely right. Like he is completely unfit to walk in and try and lead this state. And by the way, we are seeing a lot of folks who normally would just line up for the Republican not do so here, because the more he says, the more it's becoming clear to people that that's a real problem with his candidacy.
All right, before we go, just a little bit of time because you're so good at this. Could you put your race in the context of the struggle the whole country is facing?
Yeah, I do think that we are seeing, this is a very important year long term for the country. And I do think trying to make progress and gains in states beyond where we normally expect to compete, places like Ohio and Iowa, is really important. And I think that makes this year, it makes states like Ohio very significant in sort of the broader conversation. And, we're obviously, our first priority is Ohioans, turning Ohio around. One of the things about me is and I joke about this, but I was once named in college the most likely to be president of the Cincinnati Board of Tourism, because I'm literally wearing a Reds hat as we talk. Like I have been proud of my state and my city my whole life. They used to say to me, "Hey, you're from Ohio. You're from the Midwest." I'd say, "I'm not from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio." Like it was like we stood alone. So the biggest driving force for Amy and myself is this was a state that people grew up proud to be from. We were, I brag about John Glenn and Neil Armstrong and presidents and, all of it. And to see the state now be the most corrupt, to see outcomes falling, to see young people leaving because they think it's so toxic, it's just unacceptable if you grew up proud of Ohio like I did. And all the assets I bragged about as a young Ohioan, they still are here. But broken, corrupt politics have squandered it, and it's turned our state into something, and sometimes you can't really recognize. It's so divided. And again, most importantly, for everyday Ohioans, it's too expensive. And for a lot of, if you look at most measures, they're not where they should be for a state with all the assets. So there are clearly national implications. But first and foremost, you run around Ohio right now. We need to make this great state, great based on its assets, perform as well as we deserve. We have a right to be doing better in the state, and I think Ohioans are seeing that finally. They're seeing that we're not doing as well as we should be, and their lives are not what their lives should be. And with the change in leadership after decades of one side squandering it, let's start making Ohio what it was that we were all so proud of not long ago, and that can be again.
That is terrific. On a different race in your state, you have an important Senate race too going on. How's that going? I mean, some of the same dynamics are there.
Very similar. I mean, Sharon and Amy are very complimentary of each other. I always thought this beginning when I saw Sharon was going to run again. I think they bring different they bring different groups together that makes for a very robust coalition. And so I think the races will generally sink or swim together. And we've generally seen it varies a little bit, but we've generally seen the polling be about the same in both. They're different. The dynamics of the races are slightly different, but we're seeing it. We're seeing them generally going up and down together. And I think if Amy wins, I think it's very likely that we also win the Senate race. And obviously that has a huge national implication as well as an implication for the state. So Sharon is working very hard. He's all over the state, just like we are.
All right. I think you said you're raising money $24 at a time. Is that what you said?
The average grassroots donation is $24 each.
Okay, so
it is
hang on.
up.
If anybody is listening and wants to contribute $24 right now to help fix the country by rescuing Ohio, David, where do they go?
actonforgovernor.com. And we appreciate any help we can get. And by the way, a couple of weeks ago, it hasn't been true, I think the last 2 weeks, for a number of weeks in a row, we were one of the top 5 races on Act Blue when they total it up. We were the only non-federal race. It was a bunch of Senate races and Amy Acton for governor. So I think people are really captivated by her, and they're captivated by what we talked about, the opportunity to win Ohio. When you're battling a billionaire, as Amy says, the rest of us need to link arms and battle back. That's the only way we can take on that level of power. Again, Elon Musk dropping $5 million. This guy from Philadelphia, $20 million. Vivek, his own money. The only way to battle that is when everyone else says enough. We are not being bullied. We're not being bought by these people. We know they're not there for us. And so that support is really helping us keep up with this guy. And especially as we hit the final 100 days, all of it really matters. It really will help us push back, fight back, clear up the lies that they're spreading, but also especially explain to people how from the moment we get there, we are going to reduce costs that every Ohioans are being overwhelmed by.
All right, David, that's going to be our last word. I know you got to get back on the campaign trail. It's great to catch up with you, and good luck out there.
Thanks so much. Always good to catch up with you as well. Take care.